It's about professional growth and learning. I think that's the part in which I'll speak to you a little bit more in more depth during our time together today. But before I move on, are there other things that when you think about research and your experiences, I guess what have been your experiences, or why do you think that research is important to an institution, or what are some other things that you've come to understand about research as you participated in or sought to participate in it from any of the student or the faculty perspective? Yeah.
We have learned that students in particular see a real difference between research and researching.
Yes, definitely a distinction between those two things.
They're very much complementary, however, they're different.
Great. Other thoughts? Yes?
And I think sometimes, like, if you are really into analyzing like a specific topic that might be already like looked at before, if like people do the research, and I would assume like from different ages or just coming like from different like backgrounds or just like from different generations, I guess, like they might think of other things regarding that topic, and then like you could think of that research. So I think like one of the reasons research is like continuing is that like, especially like in like sciences, there might be a theory, but like we can't know like 100% sure that that's like the correct theory. So at some point someone thinks of another idea that might complement the theory, like that can be research.
Yeah, I think with perspectives, technology, evolution of knowledge, access to information, we continue to add to the body of knowledge in a lot of our subject areas. And I think different perspectives as well, which I think where Rochester really excels, is bringing very different people together in a space to possibly delve into a subject matter. Absolutely. What are some other, yes, please.
So one of the things that I was hearing with people doing research is that they sometimes end up publishing, going to conferences, and collaborating with people outside of the university. So it's like, you know, you're learning within the university, but then suddenly you're reaching out and getting involved in the world and the world's problems. And I think that's like a wonderful bridge.
It's a communal process, and it can be a very communal process overall.
Yeah.
Absolutely, great point. Yes.
I think it has the potential to change a lot of lives, like especially the example that comes to mind is like psychology research, like you're working with families and getting to learn about them on a personal level.
Yeah, the deep impact it can have on so many different scales is crazy, right? It's amazing and it's exciting at the same time to see that possible impact. Other thoughts on, I guess, other forms, or the forms you've seen research take, or other ways that you think it's important to an institution or to our society as a whole? Yeah.
Like maybe also something that happens is that now subjects are tending to be more interdisciplinary, and hence like new majors kind of grow. Like for me, the first thing is with content development, of course, now that it's very common, it's data science. Like due to the fact that there's this need for like not like being able to analyze like anything, but having this broader knowledge of not only one specific subject, but a little bit of others can help you like, again, like to learn more, but now connecting other majors.
I think it's been something of the evolution of universities and research that the silos are starting to break down, and we're seeing a lot of more collaboration across different areas because there's information or knowledge that can contribute to a subject matter, like data science being a really great example of that. Wonderful. I want to, as we kind of shift gears into connecting research to career, I think it's helpful for you to maybe get an understanding of my perspective on career. I don't look at career as a narrow kind of scope of just getting jobs. I look at career as the totality of someone's experiences over the course of their lifetime of work, of their passion, of their focus, whatever they might be doing. I look at all types of experience being part of someone's career, whether it's internship, volunteering, research, full-time work, going to graduate school. To me, those are all make up elements of someone's career, and a career is a very individual experience, and so you define what you're doing, you choose it, you're making choices and decisions based on a variety of factors to do that. So that is always my understanding of career, which sometimes we kind of like to segment different aspects of someone's experiences. We say, well, research has nothing to do with career. Those are two different things. And to me, that doesn't necessarily make sense, and I think philosophically within our office, that's something we're bridging the gap, and part of our conversation here today revolves around that. Or career has nothing to do with graduate school. Now, those are definitely two things that are very much intersected in my mind, a lot of our minds within our office about how these two intersect. So I think that's a really important caveat before we're talking about the connection of these two areas of research and career, that philosophically that's kind of the perspective I come from, that they're all building blocks to a much larger puzzle about what forms your career. And it's many times careers are not linear. And for those of us that have been working for a number of years after graduating, we know that our careers may not be exactly where we thought they might be, and they've taken some left turns and right turns that we maybe didn't anticipate, or we presented opportunities we didn't anticipate, and that's changed the course of where our career may have gone. So those are important factors and sort of backdrop information to keep in mind. So research I see as a form of experiential learning. And what I mean by that is that it's a form of learning that when a student or anyone really sort of participates, they're actually engaging in something. They're learning, but there's kind of a hands-on learning that's happening. Other forms of that could be service learning, volunteering, internships. Research falls into that category in terms of how I would classify it. There's been studies done about ways that students have engaged with universities in high-impact learning experiences, and research is one of those high-impact learning experiences because it increases one's engagement with the university. It increases one's engagement with faculty members and sometimes the society at large. So for me, as you go through the researching process, if you're doing research, conducting research, it also is about your professional growth and understanding a little bit more about yourself. First and foremost, do your values match up to the environments, but also the work that you actually might be doing? And values is one of those big determining factors about career choice. How you make decisions about your career have to do with why you are doing certain work, why you actually like to pursue certain career paths and fields. So understanding what your values are and getting that very first-hand knowledge sometimes is really an important factor in helping you make future decisions. Sometimes it's hard to connect to what those values might be, and getting that experience and exposure sometimes sheds light on that. Why do your families make decisions that they've made about choices about careers? Have you made decisions about certain majors or disciplines or what coming to Rochester as a possible option? Your values are really strong determiners of some of those decisions and how you've made those choices. This also allows you to test your alignment of your interests, not only to the subject matter, but to the process of conducting research. And this will vary depending on the disciplines in terms of the type of research and what kind of research you might be doing. But it allows you to test that road. Do you like working in labs? Do you like really delving into a subject matter and looking at primary resources or secondary resources, working with faculty members, working individually? So do your interests really align with some of those areas and really test? This gives you an opportunity to really test those things out in a very real setting. It allows you to kind of also align your skills with your work. You know, if you enjoy doing really targeted, specific skills, using your hands, really getting dirty with something, does that align with the type of work that you are sort of set up to do or that you're studying to do? Or really is there a disconnect between those two areas? This gives you a chance to look at that alignment. How do you work best with others? This may seem like a basic one, but some of us work well with teams of people. Some of us work better individually. Some of us work well if we have strong mentors. Others need sort of a collaborative process. But how you engage with others, and for those of you that have done different types of research, you know that they take a lot of different forms. And how you work and engage with other people is a big part of then the types of environments you may seek out in the future. Connecting that environment, so the type of environment that you wish to work in, or the type of environment that really you think you excel well at. What kind of learner are you? What kind of environment that really do you feel like you excel at, that you need around you, that really is important? You start to learn that and gain knowledge and perspective on those experiences through these types of experiences. And then does it match up with your intended goals and aspirations? And that may evolve over the course of time. As you do more experiences, you might realize your goals might shift because you learn some of these other things higher up on the list about your values, about your skills, about your interests. But the intended goals or aspirations, you'll come into research sometimes with something like that, and then it starts to evolve and shape, and it gets influenced by the people and the mentors and the people that you work with around you that can be really helpful. So when you look at this list, what are things that maybe other areas that you feel are missing, or reasons why you chose to do research, or things you feel that you learn when you are doing research in terms of the types of matching or the exploration that you might undergo? I know I did a really good job with my list, and so I know, but there might be other areas or other ideas as well. Are there other things you want? Yeah.
Well, sometimes research is required for the curriculum.
Yeah.
So you just do it because you have to.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of have to in some areas and some disciplines in part of that, absolutely. Yes?
I think it could be a chance to explore a certain subject area hands-on, as you said, to really see what it entails to be a part of that subject.
Kind of put your toe in the water before jumping in completely into something, committing to something, right? This gives you an opportunity to really test that before a longer term going to get a PhD in something, right? You're able to kind of see if you're ready to make that commitment, through that subject matter. Great point. Other ways it helps you in the exploration process, but also I think the other reasons why you may be attracted to doing it. Yes?
Well, I've heard several students say, I love that professor. That professor told me about their research in class, and I just wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's that, relationship with the professor, getting to know them better, and really being attracted by their work.
Yeah, I think that in the slide previous talking about relationships, this becomes a really big part of it. And I think oftentimes students see the passion faculty have for subject matter, and that's sometimes a very attractive quality. Like, wow, they really get excited about this. I'm curious as to why they're so excited. Like, let's look into that. And you get kind of attracted to people that are engaged in something and have committed much of their life to some of these subject matters. So there's definitely an attraction piece, but also that relational element that definitely allows people to build those relationships. Whether you continue on with research or not, there's a relational element to that occurs in these environments. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Wanting to make a greater purpose on wanting to make a difference in the world. I mean, it has a link to your last bullet, but it's a more altruistic.
Yeah.
I'm at school. I want to have an impact on the world in any way I can, and through this particular research, maybe I can.
We mentioned that about the impact on society, solving a problem, helping your community out. I think there is opportunity to do that in the different elements of research to varying degrees, right? There's research that you're doing for 20 years that will create a change that will have a trickle-down effect for years. There's things that you're doing right now that you might see the impact and the result of. Understanding that and their comfort level with that, but also connecting that a bigger ideal is really key. So thank you, that's wonderful. Other thoughts? Wonderful. So now we talk a little bit about marketing research experience. So we talked a little bit about sort of why it's important to the institution, what maybe some reasons are why you might pursue it, and what it might help you glean about yourself in terms of your exposure, your understanding about yourself, your values, your interests, those matching ideas. But I think oftentimes where I've seen students struggle is how do I actually talk about this experience in a way that makes sense to someone else? Sometimes when you get very detailed into this subject matter, other people may not necessarily translate well, especially if you're going outside of that subject area. But I think it's important to really think about this concept because inevitably all of you at some point will have to showcase or articulate what you've done within a lab or within a research experience with with a faculty member, and articulate to someone, whether it's a graduate program, a fellowship, a job or an internship you might be applying for, or in a conversation that you might be looking for, looking to get funded for something. You have to articulate something to someone that A, might have a clear understanding of what kind of work you've done, and more likely than not, sometimes people that B, have no idea what it is that you do, and you have to sort of translate that experience for them. So I ask you sort of first and foremost, what are some ways that I think things that you've done or things that you think you should do in order to effectively market your research experience to an outside person or outside individual? Yeah.
I think depending on like what the goal is, if you're applying for a job in a certain area, that maybe you could try to explain if there's any connections between the experience that you've had and how that will make you an appealing candidate for that position.
Absolutely. Drawing those connections. How do you think you can do that, though?
I think a lot of it might have to do with like if you're applying for a job that is more science oriented, then it probably helps to have some sort of science research experience.
So,
In a similar field.
yeah, there's definitely, so if you're linearly looking at things, right, and that what you've done relates to that organization, you try to draw those correlations. But if you're looking at nonlinear and how your experience translate that, you might emphasize different aspects of your experience, which we'll get to in a moment. But definitely spending time to reflect back is going to be an important part of that process. Yes.
I was going to say citing it on your resume, is it with the,
Yeah.
making it shine?
Yeah, putting on your resume, LinkedIn profiles, CVs, obviously spending time to effectively articulate and maybe having multiple versions of these documents depending on the audience that you might be trying to market to. Other thoughts, ways you can market earned through research experience to others?
Learn to communicate.
Learn to communicate. Sounds really basic, but I think it's really important. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What about specifically?
Writing resumes or talking to your professors, tell about their interests.
So practicing and actually taking time to think through how do I actually articulate this to someone verbally outside of my own head that what I'm doing. And it's a really important piece, and it sounds silly like, oh, communicate what you do. Sure, anybody can do that. The reality is not everyone does it effectively. Everyone can do it, but the effectiveness of it, the practice of it, really takes effort and time. So definitely communicating, just thinking about how to communicate those things is important, yes.
Even in grant writing, we have this perception when we were young and new that people should value your skills and work. You still have to sell it.
Yes. So the ability to sell yourself, information, your knowledge to another person because of funding, because of a job, is really an important skill. And that's not something that I think everyone naturally does well. It's something that you can invest time in, and you can build that, and you can really refine that. That's something personally for me that has come with time. I've learned to do that more effectively, and hopefully, obviously, that's what I do in my job, so I should be good at it. But it's something that I've had to learn and refine over the course of my career, how to effectively communicate and articulate an idea to other people. Very good. Thank you. Yes.
I think a big part of it is you have to know your audience. If it's an audience that doesn't have a scientific background, you have to avoid the jargon that is part of your field, that
Sure.
is part of the language within your field. If people don't get that,
Yeah.
and you come in and you're using a presentation that's loaded down with all kinds of technical jargon, you're going to turn people off.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I've attended some workshops even for faculty members who are applying for grants.
Mm-hmm.
And they point out that when your grant application goes before a review board, the reviewers may be from your same general area of science, but any one member of that review board may not have the amount of technical expertise you have in your particular subject area.
Sure.
So even in your grant summaries, I don't know if the right word is dummy down, but you have to be able to explain this in language even they can understand.
Yeah, I think I like to look at it as translating, right?
Yeah.
It's translating for your audience for that. If you think about it in the terms of languages, if you're fluent in a specific language, but the person you're trying to talk to is maybe conversational, you can't speak at the same rate or speed or kind of use words that they might not understand, right? You have to kind of translate it in maybe a simpler form or kind of make it something that's portable for that individual. So knowing your audience is very much a key piece. How does that relate to what goals you might have in that area?
And just to kind of piggyback on that, letting the people in that audience know how the work that you've done might ultimately affect their lives in terms they can understand is another way to possibly
Absolutely. So you're starting to see that there's the translation piece is key. And your audience, that understanding your audience is important. And you might have multiple versions of how you tell your story depending on who you're speaking with and who you're engaging with. Yeah, Kathy.
One of the issues I've noticed in working with students, it's very difficult. You've been immersed with this professor in this topic. You've been enthused about it. You've spent a lot of time at it. And it's all of a sudden, you're putting that on the resume. And then how do you break it down so you know, how do you break it down enough so that an external reader can understand, and then break it down in terms of, these are skills I can use at this employer,
Yeah.
you know, the next employer. And I find people have a lot of trouble with that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I think it takes a lot of effort to be able to do that, to take a step back and also get comfortable with being exposed to different audiences that might. I think we spend a lot of time with faculty members really drilling down, and sometimes we don't. We come out of the cave and we're like, oh, not everybody talks like this outside of what we talk about. So I think it's definitely being aware and understanding of that. Marian, did you have something?
Yeah, it's a transferability part I want to talk about. Is that it's not so much translation, but it's that if you work in a lab or you work, you know, your team skills, your ability to work effectively with others, your ability to meet deadlines, your curiosity, your creativity. These are things that, you know, your writing ability could be that you know, write effective, you know, lab reports or other kinds of reports. Communication be, but these are skills that are universal. So to translate whatever research experience you have to universal skills that employers are interested in, I think is really important.
And thank you for the helping me in my transition, because, and that's not a plant, I swear. That was very, very well done. Thank you. So each year, my professional association, which is a professional association of colleges, college people that work in career centers, and recruiters that work for corporations from around the globe, around the United States, across different industries. They do a survey every year of employers. And they ask the employers, what are the top 10 skills you're seeking in college graduates? So they do this across industry, specifically thinking about college graduates. These are the first 5. And this is, someone's saying industry, not industry specific. Decision-making and problem-solving skills, ability to work in teams, verbal communication, planning, organizing, and prioritizing, obtaining and processing information. So these are people from finance, people from pharmaceutical area, people from manufacturing, people from engineering. These are the skills that they say they're seeking or wanting in college graduates, that they need within their organizations. And they're screening, in many cases, candidates based on these things. How do they screen that? They look at your resume, how you've translated and talked about the transferability of your experiences. They've also, when they interview you, they'll ask questions around these areas. Many times they can screen for the technical pieces in a variety of ways. Do you know how to use certain equipment? Do you know how to do certain type of thing? Can you cite things in a certain way within a paper? That's stuff they can kind of get at. And once they screen for that, then they're left with a group of candidates that are kind of equal on paper. And that's where the process of interviewing and engaging you really takes place, and where they start to probe these types of ideas and these types of concepts. So the other 5, analyzing quantitative data, technical job knowledge. And you can see this wasn't actually in order. So this is technical job knowledge is number 7 in the top 10. So having very specific technical knowledge as what you want to do is much later in this top list. Computer software proficiency, creating, editing written reports, and selling or influencing others. So once again, you can start to think about that these are skills that no matter what kind of work you think you might be doing. And I think we've also articulated, if you're applying for grants, if you're working in academia, working in a research kind of environment, there's still relevant skills, because you have to sell and influence others as to why they should support you, why they should give you money to continue your research. You're writing reports because you need others to support you, but you're also trying to publish your work, writing abstracts that are this long in terms of paragraph and describing your entire research for however many years you've been working on it in a paragraph. So your ability to really synthesize information, be able to communicate and articulate that out is really, really a powerful skill. And across industries, in talking to employers on a regular basis, this is a constant thing that they always refer to. A student's ability to transfer what they've done in their experiences to what we need them to do is number 1, and that's how we're going to make our decisions. And this is something very much true at the University of Rochester. I've been, since I arrived here, I've been talking to alumni and employers about the University of Rochester, why they would recruit our students here, why they enjoy working with our students, and why they look to hire our students. And no one's ever questioned the intelligence, the rigor, and the quality or the caliber of the students here. But what they have given us feedback on, constructive feedback, is you need to work with students on their ability to transfer and talk about the transferability of what they learn in the lab, what they learn in their experiences, in their internships, in their research experiences, to make sense for me. So employers and some graduate schools and grant writers, they're very selfish, self-centered people, right? They want to know what you can do for them. And your responsibility and our responsibility in our office is to help you do this, is to be able to figure out how to take all this information, synthesize it in a way that makes sense for your audience. And that audience may vary depending on where you sit and what kind of goals you may have. But it's a really important skill that you can develop. This is not something that some of you are just very good at and then others of you will never be good at. Everyone can work on this. This is something to be developed that we will work with you in the Career Center to help you do. Your faculty members are there to support you, and there's other advisors throughout the university that want to help you and engage you on these topics so that you are able to do this more effectively. And I use this slide here because in essence, what we're talking about is how do you brand yourself to sort of this outside world? Regardless of what your goals and career, your aspirations are, there's a certain level of branding that takes place. How do you package your experiences so that it makes sense to someone else? And it is relevant regardless of career goals because you really have to think about how it sort of adds value to that individual or that organization or what they're trying to do. So the branding aspect of what you do really capitalizes on all the effort and energy you put into your work, whether it's your academics or your research lab or your internships. It's really good information. They're going to judge you on that, but your ability to help to articulate that becomes important because in many cases they're looking at a lot of top caliber students, and how do they differentiate between those students? They differentiate between students by their ability to talk through some of those areas. And like we mentioned, if you get someone that's worked in your lab or understands the subject matter you've worked with, you can talk more in a more technical sense with that individual. But inevitably, you still have to work with other people. You have to work in a team in many cases. You still have to write and articulate things. You still have to sell people on the idea that you can do something or you can take a leadership role or responsibility for different tasks in different environments. And so these skills, these transferable skills that we identify here, become really paramount in being able to, and these are universal. These are things that we keep hearing from, whether it's engineering firms, pharmaceutical, we hear from a variety of organizations across us, not specific to. Now some industries or career fields may emphasize some of these areas over others. They may place a higher importance on some of them, but no one would argue that verbal communication is a bad skill to have. I don't think you'll ever find an employer or a graduate program that will say, we don't want anybody to have to talk through anything. That's not something that we find important. So it's important to realize that these are valuable and your ability to articulate these areas is really key. So those were the kind of the close of my formal remarks. I wanted to open up to more of a discussion and questions about sort of whether it's marketing the experiences, what different organizations, graduate programs, employers are looking for, or talking about research in general and the connectivity to career planning. I'm happy to kind of open up to questions or comments from anyone in the group. Yes?
So say you had a recent experience and you gained some of these skills under your list or some of what employers want. So when you're in an interview or if you're writing a personal statement trying to describe that experience, then how do you sort of imply that you've gained those skills without just coming out and saying it? Because I mean, is that bragging in a sense?
No, I think a lot of students I've worked with have that challenge. I think that's honestly the biggest obstacle. It's like, wow, that sounds really egotistical to be like, I'm a great team player and I'm really great at writing. And so it's finding the voice that makes sense for you, but it's not implied. You have to be a little bit more direct about it and say, I've developed these skills. I developed these skills because I've committed this time. I've worked with people. I owe a lot of that to the people, that's mentors that have helped me, professors that have supported me. So it's definitely a community sort of piece of it that you've been supported in doing this. But at the end of the day, you have to talk about what you can do and what you can contribute to someone else, whether it's a graduate program or a job. So that's hard, but you have to find the right voice that makes sense for you. So I will never tell you, write it this way, you'll be better off, because you, at the end of the day, have to sit in front of someone and actually have a conversation about that. So it's okay to you don't want to take credit for everything and then say like, oh, there was not a team effort. I did everything. I found the genome that really solved all this. like that's not what we're talking about. At the same time, it's dissecting your experience and figuring out what did you do, what were you responsible for, and what was a team effort? What were your responsibilities, and what was the group? And both of them are relevant and very valid, but sometimes it's taking a lot of reflection time to think about how to differentiate and segment those things, and then practicing to talk about those things in a way that really make you comfortable. Because if you try to do something that doesn't feel comfortable, it'll show up very quickly. And for someone that might be comfortable or familiar with interviewing, they'll be able to pick up on that, and they'll either probe it or they'll ask you follow-up questions. So you have to be in a place that gives you comfort to talk about the subject matter, where it's not bragging, and some industries like you to brag. Others, I think being a little bit more humble is kind of what they're looking for as well. But they still want someone that's a performer and can contribute and be part of their team. So they're looking for achievers because they're looking for the best people to make their team better. So they want to know that you can contribute to that.
So for example, could you talk about your experience in terms of personal growth and say that by doing this I've acquired these skills?
Absolutely. So, you can always talk about things in longitudinal ways. You could say, when I arrived as a first-year student at Rochester, I didn't know anything from anything. I thought I knew something until I got into a class, and I realized, so what I've learned over the course of a year are the following things. What I've done in my research this past year was learn these specific skills. So I think we talk about, there's sort of the segmentation, right? What's your depth of knowledge about the subject matter that you've learned? But then also, what are the skills? You've learned how to research better. So what kind of research, or what's your discipline? What's your subject at your major?
Possibly psychology.
So in psychology, there's obviously different forms of research you can do. Qualitative, quantitative, direct, there's just a whole host of things. But you develop skills in each of those areas, right? And so the attainment of those skills, I'm doing interviews in a clinical setting. I understand how to do that more effectively than when I got here. That's a skill you sell, right? Because your ability to do that effectively. And then you might have a subject matter, abnormal psychology might be your area of interest, and you might have more of a depth because you did research with a faculty member on abnormal psychology, so you can look to specific things within abnormal psychology that you can kind of talk to. So it's kind of the duality, that depth of knowledge of a subject matter, but then this transferable skills that no matter where you are, the skill of interviewing someone and breaking that down and synthesizing information, that's a valuable skill set that anyone will find useful, but your ability to articulate that is going to be what's key. Other questions? Yes?
I have seen in libraries that one of the problems sometimes is the students don't realize, they say, I work in the library, that the amount of knowledge that goes and what they were doing is customer service,
sure.
For example.
Yes. And
you're interacting with people and you are organizing or doing plans.
Yes.
So doing that leap between what I do and what it means,
yes.
It's really difficult.
It can be very difficult, and that's why, frankly, our office, our responsibility is to help bridge that gap, is to say that, okay, you worked in the library, so what did you do every day? Well, I did these things. Well, that's great. What do you think you learned from that you think could be relevant somewhere else? Or when you go to the library, who helps you kind of process information or get something done? What do you, and the expectation. We work with a lot of students that have worked in the service industry, worked as waiters, worked as waitresses, worked as bartenders, and then we work with students that have worked in retail, I just worked at the Gap, doesn't mean anything. But there's a certain skill you can extrapolate from that would be relevant to other people. How you are able to transfer and translate that is a really big part of that process. And sometimes we kind of put them to the side, they're just part-time jobs. I just worked on campus. It didn't mean anything. And I think that's where our responsibility is to kind of elicit that out, and for students to think about there's value in everything, right? You've learned something in all the experiences you've had. You might have learned that you hate working at the library. Like that might be what you've learned, and that's well, why do you hate that? What exactly about? What about that experience? Why didn't I like talking to people? Well, good. Then now you know that you should not work like in a customer service facing environment. You might like that. So, but that's something you've learned, right? Now, that's something that you can now factor into the decisions you make about career path or job choice, but also how you talk about the environments that you excel at. It's not maybe working in a high volume, high customer environment. I like to work more individually, work with small teams. That's kind of my personality. That's where I learn best. So it does help you. And so it's your responsibility as a student to think about those, but the office, my office, is the setting by which you can process some of that information. And we'll push you to process that to make you more effective at articulating it overall. So it's a very, very good point. I think it's definitely the constant sort of challenge or balance within that. We see internships as important and research is important, but then all these other things is not important, but they all factor into your experience. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
With the new fresh face to university, do you have plans to attract students to come in?
Yes.
Apart from, I push students to go, but if they don't go, what good is that, right? So,
Absolutely.
So what can you do to
Yeah.
really get this type of program going?
No, thank you for asking. There's going to be a variety of changes that are going to happen within the office. One of I think the most relevant changes is that we're going to be targeting and thinking more strategically about how we engage students first and second year, so their freshman and sophomore year, to get them thinking about sort of the intersections of these kinds of ideas before they get to senior year. And they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, I need to translate all this information really fast. So working with students earlier and doing that through partnerships like this, working with with the research library, working with residence life, working with student activities where students are already engaged, and making sure that they understand that these are all part of career building. This is all part and influences and contributes to your ability of making decisions about your career. So the early engagement, I think traditionally our office has been more expecting the junior-senior engagement. And I think to me that's often too late, or it's harder to sort of have these conversations in depth. So it's really starting early. It's going to be a big part of that. I think another area is really working with faculty more closely. So whether that means that not just getting referrals, but helping faculty say, this is why you should go. Go there to help them, they can help you translate or kind of what you're doing in the lab. That's a part of the fabric of how our academics work at the university, and that it's very much interconnected between those two areas. I think that's a really important relationship that we'll be investing more time in. Across disciplines, across the institution as a whole, to be able to better engage and make it part of the norm within the university to talk about career planning as it's connected to all the different aspects of a student's experience and life at the university. So those are definitely two of those two areas. There's going to be a variety of other things, bringing alumni back to better engage with students to showcase the diversity of career paths that students can do with their degrees and disciplines. So whether you're a psychology major, a biology major, or a history major, there's a variety of options, and seeing people that have done a variety of options is always helpful to helping with the decision-making process within that. And then talking about different industry areas and career fields in a broader sense, having more information online is going to be a big part of some of that process. Giving more tools for research to students to do researching on careers is going to be an important part of that, but we don't want students to wait. We want students to engage in the conversation, but realize that whether they're working part-time at the library or they're doing research or they're doing internships, that's all connected to this career decision-making process. So thank you for the question. Yes?
Only one thing. Is your office going to work also with graduate students? I'm new to the university.
Yeah. So I think we'll be working with the graduate students within the college. And so we've probably not done much outreach to graduate students, but since those numbers are growing, especially in areas like engineering, I think it's definitely going to be more both the master's and PhD level students of seeing how we can support them in their planning.
In science, there is a lot now branching to careers that are non-traditional careers.
Well, I think the the academic job market
Yes.
for PhD students is non-existent in some cases, or so competitive that many PhD students have to identify and think about alternative paths, industry paths, more than they ever realized. And for many of them, it's the first time they're thinking about that after 15, 20 years of education. This is the first time they realize that they're not going to go work in academia. So it definitely is something that, working with the medical campus, the graduate students on the medical campus, the graduate students in the college, graduate students, engineering is not as much of an issue because there's a little bit more of a linear path there, but it's helping to expose, in many cases, in many ways, there are PhD students that are first coming upon this realization, are almost like freshman or sophomore in college, that they're realizing they don't know, they haven't explored other career paths, they don't know what options exist for them, and so it's kind of engaging them in this similar process of thinking about that. So I think we'll definitely be doing more in those communities and in those spaces for those students. You had a question?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like being either a freshman or a sophomore, then what would be like the recommendation you would give us like for doing like the first step for being into a research here? Like, what would be like a good recommendation on how to start, I guess?
Start doing research or start doing more like thinking about career planning, or both?
Or I guess both. Like
Both?
the long run.
I think the number one thing I would always tell a freshman and sophomore is get exposure to activities. So whether it's doing research or volunteering, being part of a student organization, find out where your skills and interests lie. Because I think, and then our office can help you process through some of those, and they may evolve over time. But we want you to get exposure. The exposure does a couple of things. Number one, it builds your experience. So you have actually something to speak to as you kind of go through your career to get other experiences. So you have experience you can say, look, I've done this internship, or I've done this research, or I've done this volunteer project. But the other part is, which I think is more powerful, it allows you to be a little bit reflective on what's important to you. What are the things that you gravitate towards? What kind of environments? How do you learn? Some of the things that we talked about early on, I think that are very relevant to how you make decisions about jobs, careers, whatever it may be. So what do you want to pursue? And I think unless you kind of get exposed or research or understand it, you don't really know. And I think right now, I think many college students, they suffer from this paralysis of information because there's so much information you can access. And this is where libraries are helpful, because that kind of helps you filter the information. I think where our office is, we try to help you filter the information, cancel out the things that you know for sure you're not going to do. So I could say, well, why don't you go work on Wall Street? And you're like, oh, I'm good. I don't really want to do like finance, right? So that you start to narrow down the ideas that you might have in terms of what's really interesting to you or what you're really passionate about. And that's really difficult in this era of information, of mobile phones, and you could Google anything at any point, any career, and get information on it. The other really interesting aspect of sort of career planning is that many of the jobs, what year are you currently?
I'm a freshman.
You're a freshman. So many of the jobs that will exist when you graduate don't exist currently. And some jobs that exist currently won't exist when you graduate. So the rapid change of the workforce and the employment market is crazy. This is never, like this, what we're living through is very different than 20 years ago, where it took time to develop new career paths and jobs. You know, if you told me 10 years ago that there'd be someone's job to tweet all day, I say, what is Twitter? And then, you know, that's someone's getting paid to do that. And so, but the reality is someone is, and that's a job. Now in 5 years, that might not exist because some other social media platform will exist for us to be able to do that. So that's the exciting part of being a college student right now, and also can be terrifying because there's a lot of things that evolve. And that's why one of the skills and one of the attributes, I guess you could say, that employers are looking for more and more that we didn't put up here is adaptability. Because once they hire you, and even in higher education, once you work in a lab or research, you might lose funding, or you might have a new job, or the market might take a turn. Your ability to adapt and change to different, or your ability to pick up your skills and apply them to something different is really an important skill set to have. So your flexibility and sort of kind of your ability to shift and transform is going to be a skill for moving forward. All college graduates will need to have, because the economy and the marketplace is that. That's exactly what internationally, it's global, it's so different than what we used to have. So getting that exposure and experience and understanding building your skill of translating and transferring it is going to be important because you might be doing that constantly over time.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Yes.
So, as opposed to applying for a job, if you were applying for a position to work with a research team, are they looking for the same qualities that an employer would be looking for, or is it a little different?
No, I think there's going to be a lot of overlap in that list within that. You know, you're coming into a closed community, and their ability to communicate with you, collaborate with you. Think about if you're working in a laboratory setting or in a research setting, you're constantly kind of discussing and talking and getting through an idea. And they're looking for, so your ability to articulate that to others in a group, they're going to be looking for those same, the writing skills will definitely be very important. The technical skills, depending on discipline area, your ability to use technology more and more, regardless of career field. Like, now I'm not talking just like Word, I'm like Excel, but computer language, other things, like the more you're adept at that, the more valuable you become as a commodity to organizations, regardless of the type. So I think there's definitely overlap with many of those areas. As you learn more, those are good questions to probe in your area of interest and specialty. So if you want to work at a research lab or a think tank, you know, are these the types of things that they're looking for? Yes. Okay, great. Let me see how I can articulate them. So that's part of understanding your audience and researching your audience is part of that process of learning how to market yourself. Great question. You have another one? Great.
So I noticed some research teams have the opportunity for students to do independent study. I'm not exactly sure what that means or how it ties into the research that the team is doing.
I think it depends on the academic area discipline. Independent study can be a little bit more of an autonomous experience, but you're always going to have a faculty mentor or a faculty person guiding you. They're not going to just like say, good luck with everything, see you at the end of the semester. So there's going to be some parameters, there's going to be some structure around it, but it might be more about what you're interested in and maybe being part of someone else's research project and delving into that. You might be looking at something that's maybe a corollary or something else you might have an interest in pursuing that maybe doesn't exist or nobody's actually doing it on campus. So it can be related, but it'll vary from discipline to discipline in terms of how they define independent research or independent study.
Would they assign a topic that would perhaps help with their overall goal, or?
It'll vary. So I think sometimes you're bringing the topic to them. So I'm really interested in this. Like, can I delve into that? And then they help you structure what that looks like and what that research may be. Or if you're participating in something that already is in existence, it might be more very concrete things that you might be doing with those faculty members. So I think that's where talking to faculty about what that looks like and what you can get credit for and what's part of the process starts to, and there's a variety of things you can do at Rochester for credit, for pay, for, you know, like it's all over the place, and then it will vary from major to major what you can do. Yes?
So if a student discovers that they're interested in something that Rochester is not doing, are there programs, like I know there's study abroad, there's various programs. What would you advise them to look at or do? I mean,
are you saying not doing in terms of like academic interests or career interests? Because I see those as two things.
Because I had a student that was interested in mineral rights and geology. Of course, we have, you know, an Earth and Environmental Science department, but we haven't identified a particular researcher that's doing
Sure.
that.
Yeah, there's research you can do outside of Rochester and other places. So students can apply for research opportunities at other universities or other. Yeah, there's definitely a variety of things they can do. But I think it's a good point for me, there's a difference between career interest and academic interest because I don't think careers are linear in terms of major equals X. So I think in some areas there definitely is that linearity, that you major in something, you go work in something. But in many cases, you major in something and your interest might take you in a completely different direction. So you might be a biology major and do biology research, but you might wind up working in consulting. And there's correlation to that, but your interest might be in consulting versus going on to get a PhD in biology. So I think career-wise, there's choices to be made. I think academic interest, if a student suddenly stumbles upon something that they're really passionate about academically, there's definitely ways to do research as an undergrad, Or, better yet, thinking about what are the requirements to get into a master's or PhD program in that subject matter, and what undergraduate degrees would sort of preclude them to be open to kind of following that career path. You might not have to be a mineral rights undergraduate major to go and to get a PhD in that. So that's some of the research we would do with the student to figure that out, because there's always random career paths that I've come across that I didn't know anything about. When I worked at Yale University, one of the first students I worked with, she wanted to work with roller coasters. I was like, I don't even know where to start with this. And so I had to kind of figure out like engineering for roller coasters and like who builds them. So it kind of led us down this rabbit hole of that. But I think there's always going to be things like that, and that's where we work with students to figure that sort of out together, and then I think working with faculty kind of figure some of those elements out.